It took forever, way longer than any of us would have liked, but Immortal Empires is here. The Champions of Chaos DLC is out, and it appears we may finally be back on track, or at least getting there. Certainly not towards a perfect game, or anything of the sort. There's a mountain of content to sink our teeth into at this point, more than anyone could ever experience in a reasonable amount of time. So naturally, I want to talk about the future. Specifically, the future of the undead and how these new blueprints for DLC may impact them as we move forward. Say what you want about the Champions of Chaos update, it has some big time advantages over previous Lord Pack formats, avoiding the pitfalls that so many others fell victim to over the years, where one faction receives substantially better content than the other. Ikit Claw and the Prophet and the Warlock comes to mind on that front. When you only have one faction to worry about, go figure, it's a simpler thing to ensure that they get the care and attention they so richly deserve. And the Warriors of Chaos are in a great spot now because of it. But if we were to extrapolate the format used there for another faction, there's one in particular that I think would benefit more than just about anybody else. The Vampire Counts, whose last true content update was almost 4 years ago, when Bloodlines first made their way into Warhammer 2. 4 Bloodlines, 4 new Legendary Lords, a long-needed content injection for the Midnight Aristocracy. Sounds good to me. But Indie Pride, you say. There are 5 Vampire Bloodlines. Why are you forgetting the Von Karst? Shut your stupid face. If you are wanting or expecting more Von Karsteins at this point, punch yourself in the nose. If you want Conrad over literally any other lord, that's not an opinion, you're just wrong. Well, you are factually wrong. We absolutely do not need any more Von Karstein free LC or DLC. There is nothing unique or even particularly interesting about Conrad as a character that could not be improved upon by anyone else. So, when I say 4 Vampire Bloodlines, I am of course referring to the Lamians, the Blood Dragons, the Necrarchs, and the Strigoi. 4 Bloodlines, 4 characters in the exact same format as the Champions of Chaos. Because the Bloodlines update, while reasonable for a free LC at the time, didn't even come close to doing them all justice. The state of Necrarchs, for example, is downright farcical. They're just a low-quality kit bash in their current form. I've seen similar work from first-time modders when it comes to their model. It's really not great. So the question then becomes, what do the Vampire Counts need in their rework to be brought forth unto this modern age, and which characters make the most sense to be included? Let's do a brief overview on some of the changes I'd like to see for the race as a whole, and then we can dive into the specifics when it comes to Legendary Lords, start positions, and mechanics. One of the big ones for me is atmosphere. Kind of always been one of the important things for me, an element that's been lacking in Sylvania and abroad since the release of Warhammer 1. When I'm playing against the Vampire accounts, I want to feel a certain type of way, and in my opinion anyway, it's currently lacking that little something something. The crypts, the gravestones, the reaching limbs of withered trees, the howl of wolves, and red eyes piercing through the night, the darkness. I want to be spooked when I fight a battle in the moors of Sylvania, and the reality is we still don't really have night battles that are worthy of the name. The Castle Drakenfels missions for Vermintides 1 and 2 are the best Warhammer depiction of what that vibe should feel like in any medium, and it's something CA should strive to emulate that on new battlefields too. And if you're going to do night battles justice, you need Morslib, huge, green, and swollen, like a pregnant hag hanging low in that night sky. New battle maps, new lighting, and the presence of the Chaos Moon would go a long way in setting the mood, and naturally would benefit every other race as well. If you invade Sylvania, you get to enjoy that too. On the gameplay side, a couple things still don't quite sit right with me. Number 1, vampires on tabletop are movement 6, which is approaching slower cavalry type speeds. In Immortal Empires, they move at about the same speed as regular human infantry, which just doesn't make any sense. These are preternatural beasts. They should look like it, and they should hunt like it, mount or not. Get them into the 50s in terms of their base move speed, fix up their animations, or introduce some new ones if need be. They should not be that slow. And while you're at it, properly split leadership and crumbling so that they only affect the correct targets. Vampiric units like Blood Knights should not crumble. Still living units like Crypt Ghouls and Crypt Horrors should not crumble. They are not technically undead, or at least they aren't the kind that are going to disappear when the necromancer binding them dies. They are not bound puppets subject to the same rules and reanimation protocols as zombies or skeletons, and should instead have standard morale, because they still have a sense of self-preservation. If a Strigoi Ghoul King is struck down in their presence, his army of flesh eaters will not unbind and fall apart. They will howl and cry and slink back into their caves. They will run away. When Manfred loses at Helfen, he doesn't crumble into dust, he runs away, like Starscream. I get that making Crumble an army-wide ability makes the counts easier to balance, but it's simply not accurate to the source material nor the tabletop, where vampire characters explicitly did not crumble. When it comes to Vlad and Manfred, both should be able to install themselves as Emperor and create a midnight aristocracy in the heart of Altdorf, establishing a dark mirror and parody of all the Empire once was, through the Elector Count system. If they win their vampire war against the Empire of Man, they should be able to claim its spoils for their own. It's quite literally their ultimate goal, and the driving impetus behind Vlad's entire character arc. In the end times, he installs himself as an Elector Count, or at least tries to, when he comes to the Empire's aid against the forces of chaos. It's really all Vlad's about. And of course, the Bloodlines mechanic, as it stands currently, feels kinda bare bones, a bit placeholder, and quite a few of the Blood Kiss upgrades feel downright anemic and aren't really worth investing in. So a bit of an overhaul there would certainly be welcome too. I also wouldn't mind seeing a complete overhaul to Cairn Race, which could be brought in a hero slot and more closer to Tomb Banshees than Graveguard from a Total War perspective. Much lower model count, much more deadly on a per model basis. I'd argue they should feel quite a bit more elite than their current implementation. That's hardly a comprehensive list of everything the vampires need, so feel free to throw your own ideas into the ring when it comes to improving their campaign and battle experience. But for now, let's turn our attention to the Bloodlines themselves. The Midnight Aristocracy is known for being very splintered and fractious, with many different factions spread throughout the world, vying for control in their own unique ways. Civil wars between them, not uncommon. We've seen that all the way since the fall of Lamia, where the Lamians of Neferata's brood focused on the arts of diplomacy, espionage, and seduction. The Strigoi embraced the muck, forging petty kingdoms amongst the catacombs, cairns, and caves of the old world. The Blood Dragons are a martial order who can trace their lineage all the way back to Abrash, first of their kind, who take an almost coordinate approach to honor and melee combat, and the Necrarchs of Ushoran's line are withered husks with incredible necromantic knowledge, and they are the most skilled at wielding Shaiish, the Wind of Death. So we'll start with the Lamians, because Neferata is my boo, of course, and she is the clear-cut, obvious choice to represent vampirism as the Mortarch of Blood. I did a very in-depth lore video where we covered her items, special rules, and implementation before, so to keep it short and sweet, she is a level 3 wizard combining death, shadow, and vampires, probably 2 spells from each, and she has 2 magic items to boot. Akhmet Jar, the Dagger of Jet, and Aken Seth, the Staff of Pain, whose enchantments add crippling agonies to any spells she casts. By the end times, she rides her very own Hound of Usirian, the dread abyssal named Nagadron, that feasts upon the souls of gluttons, and with her, she would bring the Coven Throne, a centerpiece model ridden by a gaggle of Lamian vampire ladies that can scry the future with virgin's blood, avoiding all incoming damage, imbuing a ward save to nearby units, and enthrall enemy troops as well, forcing them to attack themselves in a battle of wills. As we've talked about many times in the past, Neferata would begin her campaign in Silver Pinnacle, near the western edge of the Darklands, east of Sylvania, and her playthrough would focus on turning mortals into vampires via her own unique Blood Kiss mechanic. Just like the feature Be'lakor currently has in turning characters into demon princes, so too would Neferata turn certain characters into vampires. While the High Elves' influence mechanic would allow her to plunge into the politicking and espionage that has made her house so famed and feared over the last several millennia. The Lamian Sisterhood campaign would be much more focused on diplomacy and turning factions inside out and against each other, rather than the more warlike bloodlines that we'll talk about now. Naturally, the Blood Dragons under Walach Harkon would be the exact opposite. A martial order of supreme skill and vicious in close quarters combat. Theirs would be a very militaristic campaign, with the Grand Master of Bloodkeep as their legendary lord. From a lore perspective, they would naturally start in the Grey Mountains, around the borders of Wissenland, but the reality is a character like Walach Harkon could pretty much go anywhere, and one of these lords will probably need to migrate into Game 3 areas of the map. So, Cathay might make a lot of sense, perhaps as Walach tries to drink the blood of Mommy Meowist in a bid to purge his red thirst forever. If you remember, that is exactly how Abrash himself threw off the yokes of vampirism many eons ago, and there's no question the sons and daughters of the Celestial Dragon Emperor would be a much higher prize than the dragon Abrash himself gorged upon. So to that end, Abrash as a potential legendary hero, a la the Green Knight, could make a lot of sense. Essentially, you take Walach Harkon into Cathay, you beat down the Great Bastion, you take out Miao Ying and Zhao Ming, you feast on their blood, get some powerful buffs, partially undo the madness of your vampirism, and Abrash the Great One comes out of hiding to join you on your quest. Vampire Thralls and dismounted Blood Dragon infantry with great weapons, similar to the units we had in Call of Warhammer, beginning of the end times, could accompany that element of the roster. Next, we have the Necrarchs, which are perhaps the most in need of an overhaul of all 4 bloodlines, considering the current state of their models, which are kind of atrocious. I mean, they literally are just kit bashes from existing assets, and that really doesn't look great, especially because Necrarchs don't look like that at all. And for them, things get a little bit weird because all 3 of their potential named characters are so closely intertwined. Ushoran the Wicked, the father of all vampires, was the founder of this particular bloodline and the one who taught Neferata while they worked on the Elixir of Life. That was all the way back in Lamian days before the fall. He eventually had a protege named Melchior who overwhelmed and consumed him while he walked amidst the spirit world, but rumors have it that Ushoran took Melchior's body for his own during their duel, transferring his essence to a new body. Finally, we have Zacharias the Everliving, the character that I expect will be the Necrarch representative in Game 3, who went through much the same cycle with Melchior, only this time when he lost the first duel against his master, he stumbled upon a dragon cave and did what only Abrash had ever done before. He slaked his thirst on the blood of a dragon, swelled with unholy power, and cured himself of his bloodlust, if not his will to dominate. When he returned to Melchior, he rode this undead dragon and defeated his teacher, consuming his essence and power, and becoming the foremost Necrarch on the planet. Although, who's to say whether it was truly Zacharias or Ushoran whose will won out in the end. So, Melchior consumed Ushoran, Zacharias consumed Melchior, but is Ushoran still around within Zacharias? Who's to say? Either way, Necrarchs are hideous, shriveled creatures that are the nerdiest and most bookish of all the bloodlines. They are the weakest melee combatants and the strongest casters, entirely devoted to the books of Nagash and necromantic lore in general. And Zacharias would rule from the Forest of Shadows near Ostland and approaching the borders of Kislev. With him would come an updated and finally lore-accurate version of Necrarchs, withered and creepy looking as they should be, and flesh-crafting mechanics that will allow their kind to create units like Abyssal Terrors and Patchwork Men. This would essentially be throughout the Uncleans and Clan Molders Hell Pit, the Forbidden Workshop, just swapped for zombie body parts and decaying human remains. Finally, we have the Strigoi, and their ilk could be represented by one of 2 characters. Either Vorag Bloodytooth, the first Ghoul King, or Ushoran the Carrion King, younger brother of Neferata. Now, there's a lot of canon conflict surrounding both characters, but realistically, I think you could make a good argument for either one of them making a return, despite rumors of both their deaths. Again, they are vampires. They can return anytime Creative Assembly says they want them to return. If you can bring a character like Rapunzel de Lyonnaise back, you can definitely bring a vampire back. And the reality is, contrary to what many seem to think, Ushoran is still very much alive in Warhammer lore during this time period, and in fact even made the jump to Age of Sigmar, where he founded the Flesh Eater Courts. There's been talk about how he never devolved into a proper Strigoi vampire during his reign, and that it was only after his fall from grace that Strigoi even became what we know of them as today. But my understanding is that he eventually went mad in the sewers of Nagashizar and marched down the same path that many of his own followers took after the dissolution of the Strigos Empire and the fall of Morkane. He was rumored to have been killed when Neferata and the other bloodlines sought vengeance on him after his extremely successful empire building, which, combined with a powerful Greenskin Zwa, proved to be too much to handle, and everything around him crumbled, blasted by an Orc Shaman, and sounds like he was killed, but in truth, he survived that attack and is still haunting the Marshes of Madness in the Badlands to this day. And now, he very much looks like a Strigoi Ghoul King. As for Vorag Bloodytooth, the first Ghoul King, he would start his campaign in the Plane of Bones at you guessed it, the Fortress of Vorag, and his goal would be to reclaim and rebuild this lost Strigos Empire in Morkane, in the Marshes of Madness, and to do it, he would grant Crypt Ghouls and Crypt Horrors powerful stat buffs to make them viable in mid and late game. I'm not torn up about it either way. I trust CA would be able to give us a fun, interesting, and unique character, no matter which one they decided to go with, but if I had to choose one, I would prefer Ushoran, just because he's older and more the progenitor of the entire Strigos bloodline, the one who forged one of the greatest empires in history, and the one who has pretty close ties to Neferata and Ushoran, who would both also be included in this Lord pack in one way or another. So, Neferata, Walach Harkon, Zacharias the Everliving, and Ushoran the Carrion King, with a potential legendary hero in Abrash, first of the Blood Dragons. Sounds like a fun Lord pack to me. Been a little bit burnt out, so apologies for the slow uploads over the last week or so. I'm actually going to the Outer Banks for a week on the same day that this video goes live. I will have a few stockpiled videos over the next 7 days. It won't be daily uploads, but when I return next Friday, we'll get right back to work and content should pick up again after that. Lots of cool lore, battles, and hopefully some Darktide content upon my return. So please, do let me know which characters and units you would like to see make their way into this Vampire Counts update, which features and mechanics you'd like to see, and I will see you all in the next video. Any Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.